Greetings, citizens of Australia. We are Anonymous. Now it is the time for some real news. Or, should we say, truth. With the recent arrest of up to 7 Muslim terrorists in Melbourne who were plotting a major Islamic terrorist attack, the time is coming for the Australian people to arm themselves. Anonymous warned Australia that violence with Islamists will only increase. The Australian government is still importing these so-called refugees, with no end in sight. Soon, just like Germany and some other parts of Europe, your government will demand that you allow them into your homes. This is just like letting the fox into the hen house. The violence is only going to get much worse. The Australian government is cowardly. You have school teachers wearing leftist propaganda into your school classrooms, and then these teachers are lying to the children in order to get them to make drawings about the fake refugees in the detention centre on Manus Island. Shows how gutless your politicians really are with their empty threats to discipline them. All this is doing is indoctrinating children without parental consent. As more and more Islamists enter the country, here is what will happen. Their numbers will grow. They will make more demands, and even more concessions, followed by an endless repetition of more demands, and more concessions. Your leftist politicians will cater and pander to them as they always do, out of fear, and they will keep paying the Islamic jizya tax to other Islamic nations in the vain hope that they will hold back the Islamic invasion of Australia. Citizens of Australia, make no mistake. This is an invasion, pure and simple. Never before have refugees been seen to have the latest smartphones, laptops, and designer-labeled clothing. Never before has the corrupted media made fake video footage about alleged mass murders involving any other faith. It seems that the Islamic death cult is a special exception. The more Islamist numbers in Australia grow, the more the need for housing will rise, and the numbers with homeless people will rise as well. In order to supply housing for fake refugees, the leftist politicians want Islamists to move into aged care facilities. This is currently taking place with the aid of St. Vincent de Paul. These places are meant for the elderly, not Islamists with children who are 25 years old, just like what is happening in Europe. The people will speak out about it and even hold protest rallies. Your leftist politicians do not care. Your welfare system will become even more overburdened. This will result in you, the people, being forced out of your homes and your welfare payments cancelled in the future. You will become homeless because you cannot afford your rent. Your leftist politicians do not care. Islamic enclaves will become more and more throughout your suburbs and your cities. In fact, they are already in place. Just try to walk through areas in Western Sydney such as Lakemba, Auburn, Ashfield, Bankstown, and many others without being confronted, or worse. Criminal acts committed by Islamists will rise to non-manageable numbers, just like they have in Europe. The courts will keep letting them go because of an already overcrowded prison system, rather than deport them. There will be violent beatings in the streets, police will be chased from Islamic enclaves where Islamic law is enforced by Muslims. There will be rape gangs. Men, women and children will not be safe anywhere on the streets. The plans to disarm the people in Australia were set in motion decades ago when the Australian government orchestrated the Port Arthur massacre. There is proof available online for this information which is not hard to find. Dozens of people were killed with headshots, and the blame was placed on a simpleton who is incapable of such an act. The Australian government did this in order to disarm the people so that they couldn't fight back. The government took away the people's guns, then made it illegal for people to carry knives. After this was done, the only real threat left to Islam in Australia was the motorcycle gangs. For the most part, they can no longer be seen with each other, let alone wear their patches in public without being arrested. To add to this, that more than half of motorcycle clubs in Australia are now under the control of Islam, with the majority of their members being Islamic. Some of these clubs however, are very anti-Islamic, and have no regard for the lawmakers. But how are the Islamists financing themselves? Aside from scamming the Centrelink welfare system, some of the banks in Australia offer no-interest loans to people of the Islamic faith. These are only available to Islamists. A regular citizen cannot get a loan such as this, as the banks would lose money. The fact that these no-interest loans are even being offered to immigrants tells us all that a higher power is in play. The biggest operator for this loan scheme is the National Australia Bank. Another way that Islamic fraud is happening in Australia is with the Islamists who entered the country legally. They will wait up to a year to establish a place of residence, take out a real loan under their name for anywhere up to $50,000, even higher in some cases. Then they transfer all the finances abroad, and return to their country of origin. They then change their legal name in their country of birth, then re-enter Australia and repeat the process. The government is all too aware of this scam. If these people did this in their own countries, they would be killed for it. The government needs to explain why Islamic law is being permitted to operate in Australia when they claim that Australian law is the only law. By this point, some of you may be wondering that it will be all right, the police and the military will protect us against the coming violence. Anonymous has this very serious message for Australians. The Australian security industry has too many Islamic security guards. They are literally a plague within the security industry. There are so many that they cannot be counted. Approximately 30% of them are legally armed with firearms. If Islamists cannot be trusted to integrate into the Australian culture, then how can they be expected to uphold Australian law? The correct answer is the only answer to this question, and that answer is, they cannot be trusted at all. The Australian police force is more interested at revenue raising than actual police work, thanks to the corrupt government, and some police officers leave the job as a result. Do not count on police protection when the time comes. They will have no choice but to side with their political masters. Do not count on the military either. Australia practically has no military left to speak of. It was infiltrated by the left. It has leftist leadership, and has even allowed Islamists into it. These are all researchable and verifiable facts. Anonymous knows that certain sectors of government, such as the Australian Federal Police, the police force, and ACO, as well as other government departments, have already compiled all of the information relating to Islamic numbers, potential threats, fraud, and their unwillingness to assimilate into the Australian way of life for us. This information has already been presented to the government several times over in the last 4 decades. All we need to do is use a little common sense, and look at any Islamic country to see what is happening for ourselves. The Islamic invasion of Australia began in the 1980s. By 2011 it was estimated that around 2.2% of Australians were Islamists. The problem with those figures is that it does not take into account the number of Islamists who are in the country illegally, and who are not on the system. So, in reality, the numbers are much higher and nobody knows how many. Now, with the estimated 6.5% in 2016, it will reach epidemic proportions within 5 years' time, at the current rate, because of the Islamist agenda. If it happens at the same rate as it did with Germany and France, where millions of Islamists are swarming in, then the expected time frame will decrease to 12 months, or less. Any Islamic country where Islamic law is the dominant social practice is not peaceful. Gay people are thrown from the rooftops. Women are buried up to their necks and stoned for adultery, or for even being suspected of it. They are also stoned for simply walking in public by themselves. If a woman is raped, then she needs 4 male witnesses to prove the rape happened. Her punishment for being raped, regardless of her innocence, is being publicly flogged, stoned, or beheaded. The Islamic lifestyle is an extremely brutal one. It has been slaughtering its way around the world for over 1,400 years. Islam is about as welcome in any civilized nation as the plague. The path of Islam is always the same, and there is a pattern to what they are doing. Here is how the Islamic invasion by stealth, or agenda, operates. First, establish a mosque. Second, create an enclave. Third, breed like rabbits and grow their population. Fourth, claim victimhood. Fifth, resist their host nation's authorities and customs. Sixth, exploit the laws and welfare systems. Seventh, demand and institute Sharia law. 8. Secede from society. Ninth, take control. Those previous 9 points do not necessarily happen in that order, but they all happen. If the leftists argue this point, then tell them the following facts. Afghanistan was once a Buddhist nation. Pakistan was once a Hindu nation. Lebanon was a Christian nation. All of those nations are now Islamic. Europe is well on the path to being Islamic dominated. America and Australia are on the way too. When Islam eventually tries to take control within Australia, this is when the civil war will begin. We have stated before that it will be the left wing versus the right wing. Islam will side with the left wing, as some of their goals are the same. Only when it is too late, will the leftists finally realize that they were wrong, and they will have no choice but to fight, or die. Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull is now pushing for Australia to become a republic. Anonymous has this message for the Australian people, and it is our most important message yet. It surprises us that Malcolm Turnbull is even bothering to call for referendum to push for an Australian republic, since he usually tries to do these things while you are distracted, and by stealth. It is absolutely imperative that you, the Australian people, do not vote for a republic. The reason Malcolm Turnbull is doing this is so that he, the anti-United Nations, and the world elites can rewrite your constitution completely in their favor and against the people. It may look good at first glance, but what will happen is that they will not allow the people to see the new constitution until it is too late. They will instead show portions of it and say, "Look how good this is for you," while hiding the sections that they don't want you to see. If this happens, all of your rights and freedoms will be taken away. Australia has already refused the push for a republic once. It is time to do so again. To those of you in power who are trying to bring down Anonymous, know this. You will fail. Anonymous is an idea. Ideas are bulletproof. We are your local bus driver. We are your local service station attendant. We are your social worker. We are your police officer. We are your government employee. We are your cleaner. We are your public servant. We are your checkout operator. We are your secretary. We are your IT professional. We are your restaurant chef. We are your train driver. We are your average Australian in the street. You could walk right by one of us, and you would never know it. Anonymous is everywhere. Anonymous is in every sector of the Australian corporate world that you could possibly imagine. Anonymous is watching. Anonymous is listening. We are Anonymous. We are Legion. We do not forgive. We do not forget. Expect us.